Hello and welcome to the Eng Lang Pro YouTube channel. My name is Abbie. I'm one of the tutors here at ELP. All of us tutors have scored a raw 46 or above in VCE English Language, and whether you're a student hoping to get in that top 1%, maybe a 40 plus, a 30 plus, or even if you just like language, we are here to help you out. Today, we're going to be going through some syntax metalanguage, essentially how you can identify and analyze sentence structures. Now, a lot of the time, we get very confident with lexicology, we get pretty confident with phonology, and then all of a sudden syntax comes up and we're like, oh my gosh, this is scary, this is the end of the world. Here, I'm going to break it down in a few different ways on how you can identify your sentence structure. Remember, structure being the 5 types, not your sentence types like declarative or imperatives, and be able to kind of get them right every single time and be super confident. This is important for your analytical commentary because discussing syntax is one of the sort of domains, the subsystems that you just have to analyze. And it's also important for your SAQs, both if you get a broader question like justify the register, but also VCA has in the past specifically asked students to identify or analyze and break down a sentence structure. So it's really something that we have to be all over the top of, but a lot of the times can accidentally slip under the radar. Let's get started. So first things first, they are not scary. Here's a quick rundown of our different sentence structures or how we think about them in English language. So we have a sentence fragment, we have a simple sentence, a compound sentence, compound complex, and then a complex sentence. I've arranged them left to right in order of almost difficulty or complexity in a way. Now, this is a quick recap. Hopefully you should be all on top of it. But for a sentence fragment, we have no clauses. It's essentially not a sentence at all. That's why it's a fragment. This means that sort of when we think about it, the number of main verbs we have or the subject to verb kind of pairing, grouping will be 0. And I'll kind of break that down further along in the lesson. For a simple sentence, if you see one and you get asked to analyze it, you're probably going to do a little fist bump in the air, go yay, because it's pretty obvious what you'll be looking for. You're going to have one independent clause. This means that you're going to have one main verb or verb phrase and a subject associated with it, like John ate the apple or John is eating. For a compound sentence, we're really looking at the number of clauses. Now, this is also probably going to be something that is relatively straightforward. What you're looking for is 2 independent clauses. Now, to figure out what the difference between an independent or a dependent clause is, before we continue looking further to the right-hand side of the table, I'm just going to run us through a few important things to remember. First things first, the difference between what a phrase is, what a clause is, and what a sentence is. A lot of the time, we get quite used to just calling things sentences when we actually haven't understood or justified that maybe they actually are. It's quite something that's common in our everyday vocabulary. Now, we have to remember that there is a difference between a sentence, a clause, and a phrase. So, if we're starting from the bottom, before we even get to a phrase, we're going to just have a single word. We might just have a noun like tree or apple, etc., or a verb like eat, drink. When we get a phrase, we're going to get kind of this extra information attached. It's sort of our way of describing maybe the determiner as well. Maybe there's an adjective as well. For example, the big tree. We have tree being our noun. We have big being our adjective describing tree, and we have the being our determiner describing the big tree or being attached to quantify the tree itself. Now, the reason why this isn't a clause is because we don't have a subject-verb pair. We don't have any sort of simple sentence or anything going on here. If you're thinking about it linguistically, no subject-verb pair. If you're thinking about it from kind of a logistics perspective, if someone says the big tree, yes, you might be able to picture a tree that is large in size, but it's not going to be doing anything. There's nothing in the sentence actually suggesting what's going on. Therefore, it's telling us that it's not a clause, it's not a sentence in and of itself. Now, if we move down to clause, it's essentially going to be made up of phrases. And the type of phrases that we're going to get is going to be a subject, typically a noun, and a verb. A clause you can very closely and pretty much always surefire way just look at the verbs. For example, the child runs. We've got our subject, our noun, child, the child, determinant noun. And then we have our verb runs. And you can see they're almost paired together, right? There's this idea that it's the child doing something. They're sort of almost a single unit. Now, the same thing that a clause is also a simple sentence. So we've almost ticked off one of our columns here in our table. So the child runs is both a clause, an independent clause, and a simple sentence. Now, if you're thinking, well, what actually is a sentence then in its linguistic way, just as a refresher, it's going to be one or more clauses. Multiple clauses are going to be joined together by conjunctions or by a comma. Now, as we get into this right side of the table, our biggest hint as to what is a dependent or independent clause is going to be determined by what conjunctions are joining together our clauses. This is where a bit of a potentially archaic acronym comes in, fanboys, to remember our coordinating conjunctions. This is something that I highly, highly, highly recommend you commit to memory. It will be a bit of a make or break if you end up being asked a question on sentence structure and it's not something that is glaringly just a fragment or simple sentence. For fanboys, it is for, and, nor, but, or, yet, or so. Do just remember all of them are probably relatively easy to not get mixed up. Besides our be, our but, it is not because, it is but. Now, if you see one of these joining up two clauses, not two sentences, two clauses, you know that it is a coordinating conjunction. And what this means is that we have a compound sentence because the clauses are independent. If you have a quick scan, it's a long sentence, you see multiple verbs, and you do not see any of these here, you know that the conjunction joining them is subordinating, and you know that you have a dependent clause on your hands, which means that it's either going to be compound complex if you have a coordinating, so you have a fanboys as well, or it's going to be just a complex sentence. Alrighty. Now we're going to run through some examples to try and wrap our heads around and get used to spotting sentence structures together. If we have a look, we're going to start from the VCA 2019 Section A exam. This one specifically had a question on the sentence structure, which we'll have a look at further. But it is also, just a few elements to note, a written text from an excerpt of a novel from the perspective of a young boy called Jimmy. This is the first sentence that I've got up on the screen, just a screenshot. And we have the sentences, it was Saturday morning, and I was doing the gardening with Mum. My dad was still asleep. If we want to take the first sentence and ask ourselves, okay, what is the sentence structure? So you get a 1 marker. What is the sentence structure of it was a Saturday morning? You can see quite quickly, okay, what have I got here? I've got my and in the middle. If I remember my fanboys, fan, A is and. And if we go and kind of break it down, we have our two independent clauses. It was Saturday morning and I was doing the gardening with Mum. Now, from a logistical perspective, if you say are in crisis and you forget your fanboys, one of the things straight away you can think of is, well, both of these things stand by themselves. Someone can say, I was doing the gardening with Mum, and someone can also say, it was Saturday morning, and they don't need to be together to make sense. You can say them out of the blue. You don't need them attached. So, what does this tell us? We've got two independent clauses. It was Saturday, I was doing the gardening. And then our fanboys, they're joined by a coordinating conjunction. They're joined by and. What does this make it? A compound sentence. Now, that one should be relatively straightforward, just refreshing our use of fanboys, our use of potentially this table. I highly recommend you to use it, print it out, laminate it, carry it around with you if it helps you to kind of remember what you're looking for, especially when you get into syntactically more complex structures. So we have a compound sentence. Now, a quick note here is that you might be a little bit tripped up when you're looking for the amount of verbs, seeing gardening. And you see, well, this has got this ing suffix, and we have an ing suffix here with doing. So what does that do? Now, if we're trying to identify word classes, there are a few things to remember that tell us it's not actually a verb. So our first thing is that yes, we have the ing suffix, but if we look at the position in the sentence, we can see that we have this doing the gardening. Now, the is a determiner, and we know that when we get something following a determiner, it's going to be a noun. You're doing the gardening. This tells us from a bit of a linguistic perspective that gardening is a noun. It is not a verb in this sentence. Now, from a bit more of a general knowledge, a bit more of a, anything linguistic is scary, let's just kind of try and logic our way through this problem. What you can also do is replace the sort of the word, the phrase, etc. that you're scared of, for want of a better word, with something else that is the same structure that you think it may be. And if it sounds grammatically like it can work, then you know that it is that sentence structure. So, for example, we have here cooking the fish, which is very similar to doing the garden. Now, we know that fish, or whatever you're choosing to substitute is, you know the word class. In this case, fish is a noun, although it can also be a verb. But we know when we're substituting it in this context, it is a noun. So if we're seeing that doing the gardening and cooking the fish both sound as though they make sense, and fish is a noun, then by kind of logic, gardening is also a noun. So cooking, like doing, the, like the, fish, like gardening, gardening is a noun. Therefore, we do not need to be tripped up from kind of either method with this idea of the ing and the gardening, and we can go, okay, I've just got my two verbs, was Saturday, doing the gardening, and it's okay. We're chilling, we've still got a compound sentence here. Alrighty, now we're going to jump into a little bit of a harder question to break it down a bit further and make sure we're all on top of identifying our sentence structures and being able to do it quickly. This is from the exact same text. It's just going to be a section that is further down. So VCAR 2019 section A. So this is where we have our SAQs. This is question 3 worth 4 marks, and what we're going to practice doing is just identifying the structure. We're not going to focus on the second half, which is identity, because that's not really part of our meta-language ideas. The question is, give 2 examples of the main sentence structure in lines 22 to 26 of this text. Discuss how they reflect the identity of the narrator. Now, straight away, even if you're like, oh my gosh, sentence structure, syntax, this is the end of me, you can at least smile to yourself that at least you get given some lines. You don't have to look through the whole text. You know straight away, okay, 22 to 26 is my parameters. This can also kind of give you a hint, well, they've chosen these line numbers for a reason. So maybe there's a pattern here. Maybe there's something we can look for in these line numbers that mean that the question itself isn't as scary or isn't as challenging as it initially seems. So, what are you going to do? What am I going to do as a student that gets this paper? Well, the first thing is going to do, I'm going to go to my 22 to 26. Now, in your real exam, your real SAC, where you have the actual paper in front of you, I highly, highly, highly recommend that you put some lines or some markings in between the locations. Even if you're a student that didn't annotate your paper, I wasn't a student that ever got highlighters and annotated my paper, I still recommend that you put them there. That way there is no chance that you accidentally keep reading down. You can see this sentence does not finish at 26. There's no chance you keep accidentally reading down and all of a sudden you're analyzing something from 27 to 28. Just put some dashes there. Now we can see there are 4 sentences here. I got to see it up close, Dad left his thermos, Mum parked the Holden, and it smoked grey clouds. I'm going to run through a breakdown of how you will identify each structure, and I want you to follow along if you can. So when we read it together, so to speak, I want you to think of what sentence structure you would prescribe it to be. Pause the video if need be to kind of test your knowledge and understanding as we go through before I give the answer. The first one, let's see. We're starting off a little bit shorter. We've got, I got to see it up close one day. Well, what do we see with this one? We have one independent clause, I got to see it. Now, if you're thinking, okay, well, I know a lot of the time that for identifying clauses, I'm looking at the verbs, and I've got this kind of funky, scary verb thing, I got to see it. What does this tell me? How should I treat it? Well, the thing is that verbs and verb phrases kind of act synonymously when we're thinking of our sentence structure. So whilst we have this got to see it being in a bit of a weirder conjugation potentially than I saw it, it's not changing the sentence structure because we know that our sentence structure is changed when we add a new clause. This isn't a new clause at all, it's just a verb phrase, so we're still treating it as one clause. Now, what about some other parts of the sentence, like this bit of one day here? Well, does it add a new clause? The answer is no. It's just providing more information. So we can treat this whole thing as simply, we've got our subject, I, and we've got a bit of a verb phrase with some extra information, an object, it. I got to see it up close one day, and a prepositional phrase telling us when, one day. So if we're thinking, well, what is this? One independent clause. I've got a few things on. It's not as simple as John eats, but I do have some things going on. It's only one. The answer is it's a simple sentence. I really want to highlight to you guys that even if you have a sentence that is relatively long, it can still be just a simple sentence if you don't have conjunctions or commas creating a new clause. For example, you could say one day, you could add in at the market, by the fish stand. And these are all just prepositional phrases that tell you where it's occurring at the market, by the stand, but you're still only getting one clause because we're not actually adding a new clause when we add all of this information. Any noun phrase, any prepositional phrase, it's not adding a new clause. So just be mindful that length does not always kind of contradict a simple sentence. Alrighty, the next one. Dad left his thermos behind, and Mum took Robbie and me and drove it into work for him as a surprise. What have we got here? Well, if we're thinking of the amount of clauses, we have Dad left his thermos, 1. Mum took the children, 2. Drove it to work as a surprise. So we've got 3 independent clauses. If we're looking, okay, how do I know if it's a subordinating clause or not? Well, I'm going to my conjunctions. I'm going to my fanboys. And what do we have? We have the mum doing something with the coordinating and we have another and. Now, I will just note I haven't put in bold this one here, took Robbie and me, because and is not functioning as a coordinating conjunction in this instance. It's just being used to add on another noun. It's not adding on another clause. And me is just a pronoun. It's not something like and drove, where you can see there's this verb. So if we're having a look, we have 3 independent clauses. Dad left his thermos, Mum took Robbie, drove it to work. I do want to note that when we're thinking of independent clauses, we're usually thinking that they can be split up independently. Now, hypothetically, you might say, yeah, that's easy. I can put a full stop after behind. I can say Mum took Robbie and me. But you might run into trouble with drove it into work for him as a surprise, because there seems like there is no kind of subject here. I want you to note that our main way to spot a sentence is still going to be our coordinating conjunction and technically we can say that the subject is just elided or it's implied. For example, and she drove it to work for him. You can see if you read she drove it to work for him as a surprise, we still have an independent clause. It's not dependent. just because of this conjunction and this elision that's going on. So if we're thinking no dependent clauses, all independent, what does that tell us out of our compound complex, and our complex? Well, it's going to be a compound sentence. All these independents joined by and, or joined by any of our fanboys. You can see hopefully a common pattern coming up, that even with all of these, and is rather common, or is relatively common. All of them are in a way, but and in this storyteller's vocabulary is the one they're naturally leaning to, making them all independent clauses. Alrighty, third one. What do we have here? We can see we're kind of getting longer and longer. Here our sentence ends here, so a bit over one line. Here we're almost up to 2 lines. You might be thinking, okay, oh my golly, this is the longer one. And if I'm being asked, well, what's the predominant sentence type, you might be a bit concerned about all this work we're putting in. What have we got here? If we're thinking, well, how do I find this quickly? How do I get it right super quickly? You don't want to spend too long on your SAQs. Let's see. Well, Mum parked the Holden in mobile car park A. And then boom, and. Through the wire fence, I saw the insides of a body with intestines made of steel and no skin around its precious metals. Okay. Once again, I hope feel free to pause, to have a ponder, to have a write down of what you think. You can see we have a very similar conundrum with what we had before. With this and, she took Robbie and me. Here, we have an independent. Mum parked the car, where we have this subject and a verb with this kind of pairing together, right? There's this mum doing something. Here, we have another thing. Through the high wire fence is like this prepositional phrase that is inserted before, but then we have our independent clause, I saw, with once again our noun, our person, our subject, I, and then the verb saw. Now, you may be getting tripped up here, and if I were you, I certainly would, going, oh golly, what is this? Well, if we kind of just, as sort of calmly as we can, break down the structure. We have a noun, I, verb saw. Now, great, we have our determiner, so we know that our sort of object is coming. And what is it? Inside of a body with intestines made of steel and no skin around its precious metals. Now, this is an incredibly long bit of words, but it is not another clause. You can see here that when we have this and, it is merely just kind of linking together just another adverbial, adjectival phrase, right? It's just describing this object, this body again. And if you were to replace this really long noun phrase inside of a body, intestines made of steel, no skin, you could just say, I saw the body, and be completely grammatically fine, even if you may have lost some graphic detail. This tells us that we have an independent clause and that this itself is not any clause by itself. This is the independent clause with intestines made of steel through the wire fence, kind of adding this extra graphic information, not being a new clause. What have we got here? Well, we actually have less clauses than this one. Here we had 3. In this one, we only have 2. Mum parked the Holden through the wire fence. I saw the body. What does this mean? We have another compound sentence. You can see that in these different sentences, there are a lot of elements to look out for that you may be getting stuck with, but kind of at the end of the day, if you just break down, look for the conjunctions and check that the conjunctions are creating more clauses, you can relatively easily or quickly identify that it is a compound, not necessarily a complex sentence. Alrighty, our final one. It smoked grey clouds and a flame blasted from the end of a huge pole like a giant pilot light. This, we're going to go with a slightly different strategy just to show you all the different ways that if you're getting confused with one mechanism to solve a problem of sentence structure, you can try another one. Let's try, say, counting the verb to identify how many different clauses we have. What have we got? We have it smoked grey clouds and a flame blasted from the end of a huge pole like a giant pilot light. What does this tell us? Two verbs present. Okay, how are they connected? Well, a coordinating conjunction. And now, well, we have this really long stuff at the back. Is it a new clause? No. Even in bold, they're not new clauses. And hopefully towards the end of this lesson, we're kind of getting used to this idea of what we need to kind of look for. And the other noise, in a sense, this other kind of prepositional, adverbial, adjectival phrases are the noise that we just need to block out. Now, how do we know we can quickly disregard them as being whole new clauses? Well, there's no verbs here, right? And also, we know that they're just modifying information of, say, the flame. So, for example, the from is a prepositional phrase. It's telling us the location of things occurring in the sentence. And we have this like being a simile, a giant pilot light. So it's not actually a new clause in and of itself. So what do we have? We have it smoked grey clouds. Hypothetically, you could just stop it here. It tells us it's independent. And then we have a flame blasted from the end of a huge pole, etc. That's going to sound like an independent clause too. So from a count the verb tactic, we've got two, telling us it's two. We have this conjunction that's coordinating, telling us they're independent. And then if we sound it out and hear how it sounds, they definitely sound independent as well, kind of aside from what conjunction is, because smoked grey clouds and a flame blasted can both stand by themselves as sentences. This means that we have all our evidence super quickly telling us, once again, that we have a compound sentence, even though we have this other noise on the end. Alrighty, as a final little breakdown, you should be able to find the link in the description to have a look at this document if you ever need to help coming back at it, seeing how you can kind of break down different sentence structures. We have, I got to see it up close one day, simple, the one verb, even though it's a bit of a verb phrase, got to see it. We have Dad left his thermos, Mum took Robbie, drove in for work. That's being a compound with three independent clauses. We have Mum parked the Holden, I saw the inside of a body, being another compound, even though we have this kind of prepositional phrase that is becoming before the independent clause of I saw, it's still just treated as one clause. And you can even justify this in your head by saying, it could say, and I saw through the high wire fence the inside of a body. So the kind of shuffling or reshuffling of these syntactic elements aren't necessarily changing the sentence structure. And then finally, we have it smoked grey clouds, a flame blasted, once again being a compound sentence, similarly kind of training us in an easier way than this harder sentence here, that we just need to ignore the noise of prepositional, adjectival, adverbial phrases. Alrighty. So, in summary, what is super important? What are the takeaways? Firstly, you must remember fanboys, for and nor, but, or, yet, so. That is your coordinating conjunctions. If you see them, you know that they are independent clauses most likely, and that it will, if there's one, there's at least going to be a compound or compound complex sentence. Secondly, do not get thrown by noun phrases, prepositional phrases, all of that noise. Just because a sentence is long does not mean it is a compound or complex sentence. It can be a simple sentence with just a bunch of extra info like at the shops, after work, etc. What are the two main strategies you can use if you're confused on the word class of something? Substitute it with other words with the word class that you know. So if you're like, okay, fish is a noun in this context because it goes before determiner, you can say the fish instead of the gardening and go, okay, that sounds grammatically right, therefore gardening must also be a noun. If you're also not 100% sure, you can also look for the surrounding words. So for example, if it comes before a determiner like the, you will pretty much know straight away, okay, this is a noun, or kind of that sort of word class like a noun phrase. I hope this has been helpful. If it has, feel free to let us know in the comments what you would like to see next. And I also highly recommend that you check out the Eng Lang Pro website. We have a bunch of other tools that can help you learn. Have a terrific morning or night, everyone. And I hope you remember your syntax. Good luck with English language for the rest of the year.